gold for the NBA, but he's the undisputed MVP of real estate, running point for one of the most unstoppable teams in the business. A master of assists. He's got the vision, the hustle, and the winning strategy. Give it up for Rob
Welcome back, everyone, to the Fullcourt podcast, and I am super excited today. I always like to say the man, the myth, the legend, but this is actually the man, the myth, the legend. Mr. Chris Kelly's in the house. Maybe the most influential real estate guy we've had on the podcast, and I'm saying that because Mike Frazier's been on the podcast, Chris. So we've got to, put a couple jabs in with him, right? So Chris, I'll give a little bit of background for what I know and how I've known you. But Chris was our attorney here in Kansas City at Reese Nichols for several years from my start here. And then he moved down to Dallas and ran all of Ebby Halliday, which is a sister company to Reese Nichols Home Services. And then just recently promoted to the president, the man, the myth, the legend of all of Home Services companies. So welcome, Chris. Good to see you.
It's great to see you, Rob. And the most influential man in real estate is hosting the show right now. Let's be honest, So
we've got somebody else coming on, huh? To do this. All right. Sounds good. No, I'm super excited to talk to you, and you've always been so nice and wonderful to me in terms of just helping me with my business. And even the other day, I was telling somebody, I was going down a little rabbit hole on something online, right? And I text you, and I'm like, you don't need to respond to me. Like, I'm going down a rabbit hole on this, and you were like, boom, called me. 45-minute conversation. I'm like, I'm taking up way too much of your time.
No, so I was going down the same rabbit hole, so we got to do it together. So it's all good.
Right. I love picking your brain on that stuff. So I get to pick your brain in front of an audience here today. Awesome. So, we'll get kind of started with like just conversation, right? Tell us where you think the industry is headed in the next, 3 to 5 years. There's been this rise of technology, AI, consumer behavior, all of this. So where do you think we're headed in the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple different angles to look at that, but you mentioned AI. So let's start there. And I always like to kind of provide some reassurance for everybody that's in this industry, right? Because, there was a period of time, if you went back to the late 90s, there was a fear that the internet itself was going to be disruptive to the real estate industry, right? That if consumers could get access to listings online, what did they need us for? I mean, we really kind of downplayed our importance so much that we were just gatekeepers of listings. And what we found is that more people use real estate professionals today than they did pre-internet, right? So the internet was not a disruptive force as far as separating the consumer from the agent. Now, obviously, all of us had to embrace that technology, give it to the consumer, create these new ways that we interacted with the consumer, meet them where they are. Then in the mid 2000s, you and I were together for this, the rise of the portals, another thing that was viewed to be disruptive. There are more people today using real estate professionals than even pre-portal days. So that was did not get in between the agent and consumer relationship. And the way that I look at AI, it's very similar. I think it's going to be one of those things that we look back in 5 years from now, and it's just part of our daily toolbox. And if I can use AI as a real estate professional to not spend 2 hours going through an inspection report, but I have an AI assistant that goes through it and pulls out the 5 or 6 most important things that I need to make sure that the seller and listing agent address, or, can go through and look through different forms to extract the most important information. If that gives me more time to be human with my client, that's really what matters. That's the stickiness between the agent and the consumer, as you know, Rob, is that it's the human connection. It's not like, oh, Rob Ellerman's team is amazing because they look at all the forms the best. They're better at looking at forms than any other agent in Kansas City or, Iowa or Florida. That's not what it's about. It's about the human connection. So if AI allows us to have more human connection and offload some of those things that are just the other tasks that we have to perform, that's a positive. And I was at a real estate conference a couple of weeks ago, and the number of times I heard the word AI, I said, we're going to laugh at ourselves in a couple of years to where saying AI as much as we do now is going to feel like the person who's today still says www before they say a website. It's just going to be part of our world. And that's kind of how I view it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's perfect. Yeah. You make a good point there. The human element, I don't know that you can ever get rid of that. Right. So if we can use that technology to make us better, I think that's great. And I was at RP Elevate this week in Dallas, and that was a big sentiment among all the agents and stuff. Like, this isn't going to run us out of business. It's going to make the really good agents even better.
100%.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine doing your business today without the internet, right? If you didn't have, the digital access to listings, the MLS, your website, all the different things that you're using every day in the palm of your hand as a real estate professional, how much more difficult it'll be. It's just the same concept, the way that I look at it. The biggest risk factor I think we face going forward as an industry is what we would do to ourselves, right? When we stop putting the consumer interest at the forefront of what we do, and we make it harder for the consumer to interact with us, that's when I think their eyes will go elsewhere and say, is there another way to do this? Because as of now, the billions of dollars that have been spent trying to get between the agent and the consumer, it just hasn't, they've realized the hard way. The consumer really likes working with their real estate professional.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so many levels to the AI thing too, right? Like, Chat GPT on a very basic level is kind of basic, right? I mean, you can ask it questions like the Google search type stuff, or you mentioned the forms, like putting everything in and pulling out the inspection form. And I did that the other day with the blood panel, right? Like, I had a blood
Yeah.
panel, and my reports come back and I'm like, what in the world does this mean?
Am I
I'm like,
dying or am I okay?
right, right. I don't know. So Chat GPT told me that I was not dying and I'm actually fairly healthy. So
Yeah.
that was good, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
example of one thing I use it for about a couple months ago was NAR every year puts out kind of a generational trends report. It's like 130 pages, and it is incredible information. They do these massive surveys of buyers' interest, sellers' interest, working with agents. There's all this incredibly insightful information. And what I would do every year is I would pull it out, I would go through it, and pull out the things I thought. Well, this year I was like, well, wait a minute, I have an assistant sitting here who's I only have to pay $20 a month to have. And I uploaded that one. And then I also uploaded the one from 2019. And I said, I want to know what's changed. What's changed between these relationships between buyers and agents and sellers and agents and all these different things. And, and within 10 minutes of refinement of kind of going through the answers and stuff, I had that information that would normally have taken me 3 or 4 hours to manually kind of extract myself.
Yeah, that's perfect. And I'm not a big book reader. I seem like I get started and then I stop and don't get back to it or whatever. So I'm the world's worst of like, hey, summarize this book for me.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
like business books and stuff, I'm like, oh, I read 8 business books last night. It was wonderful. So I'm getting really smart over here,
There you
Chris.
go. Just give me the good stuff. Just give me the good stuff. That's right.
So 5 years from now, like, what do you see, like the traditional brokerage model? Does it look anything like it does today? Are we headed for, something completely different, or how does that look?
Yeah, I mean, every time we predict some massive change, it doesn't really come to fruition. We had the rule changes in August of last year of 2024 regarding how we discuss compensation with the consumer. And what we found was that the consumer, and I wasn't surprised by this because I think this was fundamental before the lawsuits even came about, was the consumer sees value in what we do. And so I don't think in the next 5 years you really see a fundamental shift in the consumer's perception of the value that they get from working with a real estate professional. Certainly, there's going to be changes. I mean, one of the big changes, and you are an embodiment of this, is the prevalence of teams, right? That over the last decade of how that's happened, and real estate has really become kind of a team sport, and we have amazing individual agents out there as well too. But what I see happening, I think, is it used to be in the past, the brokerages were built as an umbrella over the agents, right? Like I worked under this umbrella of my brokerage. And I think it's flipped now. And those that really want to do it right is you become a foundation that the agents then build their business upon. And you see both sides of it. I mean, you have a foundation underneath you with the brokerage you're part of, but then you also provide a foundation for all these other agents that have joined you to be part of their team or build teams within your team. And so I think the brokerages that really understand that shift of becoming a foundation for growth as opposed to an umbrella over the people that affiliate with them will continue to be really successful as we move forward. But that's really what it's about. I always think about it like when I'm flying on Southwest, those flight attendants all have to say the same warning every time, but they're allowed to kind of put their own spin on it. That's what makes it entertaining. They let their personality come out. That's what it is. If no one got into the business of real estate as an entrepreneur, to just be homogenous with some other glob of things, right? You wanted to build a brand, you wanted to build an identity, you wanted to build your own business. And then that foundational support that the broker can do, where we take things off your plate. Like, Rob, we know you don't like worrying about copier leases and support and all the things that you need to run a business. You really want to go run a business and inspire people. Let us do those things for you from a foundational perspective. And I think that's the real shift that we're seeing. And those that continue to see an umbrella, I think will probably shrink a little bit.
So you maybe just changed my entire recruiting spiel, because I've always done the umbrella, right? So I've always been like, hey, we've got home services and here's what, home services provides. And then we got Reese Nichols and we got, all our other companies and so forth. But, and then the Rob Ellerman team umbrella and stuff. But,
it
really
provides
makes sense.
A layer of protection, right? I mean, I look, when we went through the litigation, we were a foundation, but we provided that umbrella too, right? Like, a lot of those claims could have come towards agents and teams and things like that. And as a home service, as our responsibility, we did open the umbrella in that instance. But, outside of those, let's say, tumultuous, storms that are coming in, I think the really thing is to be that foundation that entrepreneurs can build a business on top of.
Yeah, absolutely. And I tell even my friends that have brokerages, right? Like, it doesn't make sense to me, right? Like, we get so much of the commission anyway, right? I mean, you guys provide the foundation and give us really big, good commission splits. And then we get to go run our teams with that. And we don't have to worry about the printers and the lights and the, all the stuff that comes along with it. Not to mention the lawsuits, right? The lawsuits came out and we as agents didn't have to really worry about that. You guys had our backs on that. So, but when you own a brokerage, I'm really a little surprised that the attorneys haven't said, okay, we've got the big boys. Yeah. So what's the next step? Let's go after every small brokerage and get 100K here, 50K there, 200K there, whatever, and start going after that. So I do think that layer of protection is really big for agents. So that's good. So if you were a brand new agent coming into the market now, like what and how would you look at structuring your business?
Yeah, I mean, I think the main thing is that the biggest fear that new agents always have is what happens when a consumer asks me how long I've been doing this. And we always try to convince them, like, the chance of that question being asked is really, really minimal. And you can out hustle folks. I remember the first time, even before I was at Reese Nichols as an attorney, was in private practice. And I remember going to like court one of my first very few times, and it was federal court too, and just being completely nervous about walking into a courtroom, feeling like I looked like I was walking into my dad's suit or something, right? It was baggy. And the partner that I worked for at the time said, look, you can't change how much experience you have, but you do have influence and control over your preparation. And chances are, it wasn't some big trial. It's just a hearing. Chances are the person on the other side has put 5 minutes of time into this. It's become so routine for them that they've put no practice, they've put no diligence into it. You can out prepare, and that brings confidence. Mm-hmm. And I remember thinking like that, okay, I do have influence and control over that. I can be more prepared than the person who's sitting across the table from me. So I think for new agents, the thing is you need to join an entity, whether that's singly as an agent with a brokerage, or if it's part of a brokerage and being part of a team. But immerse yourself in the community and culture that is going to give you all of those resources to instill that confidence in you. Because if you walk into working with a buyer, you walk in on your first listing appointment and you are prepared and you've been trained and you've been coached and you do have this team behind you, whether you're on a team or not, you have a team behind you. Your broker, like, Chad Dumas in the Lee Summit office has the back of every single one of those brand new agents when they go on that first listing appointment. And then you've got an entire army of your mortgage title insurance partners and then other agents in the office to support you. So for me, it's find that place where you're going to get the coaching, the training, the education to instill that confidence. You cannot control how long you've been doing it, but if you walk in confident, you have the answers, you anticipate the needs of the consumer, the chance of them asking that question, how long have you been doing this, is almost zero.
Yeah, for sure. And, being prepared and having a brokerage that has your back is great, but the preparation piece of it, I think, is like super important.
Yep.
And you can even drill down, like, you're going to hold an open house. When I held open houses, I went to every house that was comparable around that area. And I could smell the house and see the shag carpet. And, and when
Yeah.
somebody walked in, they're like, well, this house was, $20,000 less. And I'm like, yeah, it should have been $50,000 less because it
Yeah.
smelled like cat pee all through
Yeah.
it or whatever. So, and so being brand new, everybody was like, oh man, this dude, he knows he's really, really prepared on this. So, so I think that is massive when it comes to new agents
Yeah.
coming in
Yeah.
and putting in the work.
Yep.
And then back then when I would drive people around, we had the Rand McNally maps back in the day, right? So I would, have a pencil and I would put the X on the house and I'd map it all out and I'd write down directions and all this stuff. And then I'd go drive it before I took
Yeah.
them out to make sure there wasn't any road construction or
Yeah.
whatever. So,
And then we graduated to the really fancy MapQuest, right? Where you could go on
big time.
MapQuest and print it off, and you had like 3 pages stapled together of the directions.
Yeah. That was great. So, but it did make people understand like, oh, he took the shortcut to get here.
Yeah.
He knew where he was going. He didn't, follow the GPS, even on GPS, right? Like follow it all the way around when you could have, cut through a neighborhood and got to the house quicker.
Yep.
Or whatever. So, yeah, I think that's big. So, well, let's get into the really good stuff. All right. All right. This is where I want to pick your brain.
Yep.
So, acquisitions, mergers, we've got, oh gosh, we've got the Mr. Cooper stuff, and we've got, the Zillow lawsuits with Compass and Anywhere being acquired by Compass and all of the stuff. So let's just dive right into that. This is the rabbit hole we were down the other day, and I want to talk about it again.
Yeah. I mean, so the first thing is none of this should be surprising, because anytime, whether it's regulators or it's outside legal pressures, anytime antitrust pressures are pushed onto an industry, we typically see the inverse happening of what they were trying to get to, right? So the antitrust comes in and they're trying to, enforce maybe an artificial layer of competition across the board. And what you normally see is consolidation follow. So we've seen it in airlines, we've seen it in railroads, we've seen it in energy sectors and stuff, telecom. We've seen it in the media landscape, where you just start seeing these consolidations as you try to exert forces of antitrust. So none of this is really surprising to see what happens going forward. The one to me that really stood out is the one that, before the one from a couple weeks ago, was the Rocket, Redfin, Mr. Cooper trifecta. Because if you really want to look at it from an agent's perspective, which of these, different things that are happening out there potentially has the largest impact on what I do as an agent and for my consumer, I think it's that one. And the reason for that is what they have very vocally said on stage is the idea of creating a closed ecosystem, right? So you buy, they looked at what Homes.com did. Homes.com spent $1.5 billion to go from like the 4th or 5th portal to the 3rd portal, right? To the 2nd portal as far as traffic goes. They said, look, we could do that as Rocket because they already had a portal, or we could just go buy Redfin, which was already the 3rd, highest rated portal out there as far as consumer traffic. So they go out and spend the same amount of money. They buy Redfin. That gets you closer to the top of funnel as people are searching. But then the real thing was the buying of Mr. Cooper. Now, Rocket had their own servicing, but now they've tripled it with Mr. Cooper. And the idea is
so explain Mr. Cooper to people, because I don't think they understand. That was the one name that everybody was kind of like, what?
Yeah, what's this?
Mr.
Right?
Cooper,
Yeah.
Right?
Not a human? What happened?
Yeah. Wasn't there a show called Mr. Cooper or something like that back in the day?
Hanging with Mr. Cooper. Yeah, that's right.
That's right.
Show, if I remember right. Yeah. Anyway, Mr. Cooper's a loan servicer. So as we all know, you get your mortgage, and then about a month after you close, you get a letter that says your loan's been sold to this. It will be serviced by XYZ, and that's who your statements are going to come to you from every month, right? So loan servicing is a big business. And so what happens is Rocket buys Mr. Cooper to expand their portfolio of loan servicing. And the reason is I now have a touch point with that consumer every single month. And the idea is that eventually that consumer who's paying their mortgage, they're going to propensity score them. And they're going to say, look, if you're thinking about selling your house, if you get your mortgage through Rocket, Redfin will list your house for 1%. It's to create these closed ecosystems. The Rocket CEO was on stage, I think just about a week and a half ago, and he says, we want to help consumers stop getting ripped off. The ripped off party he's referring to is working with a real estate professional, which is interesting because none of the consumers believe they're getting ripped off by working with a professional real estate agent. But that's the dollars they see that they can extract from the transaction. And so as an agent, we used to be very agnostic, right? We would say, look, I don't really want to upset the apple cart. My buyer already is working with Mary, and that's great and all. But you don't know who Mary's company sells that loan to. And if your buyer, your client, their mortgage eventually falls into one of these closed ecosystems, it becomes increasingly difficult to get that consumer back 5, 6, 7, 10 years down the road when they're going to be dripped on in these closed ecosystems. And maybe even if you do, it now comes with a referral fee to get your own client back. And so that's the part to me where we really need to be careful. Why I like the home services model. We have all those services, but they're there to protect the relationship between the agent and the consumer. And I know a lot of folks have other partners out there too. That's the thing as an agent, you got to really be making sure of that. I'm working with people that are here to help preserve my relationship with the consumer, not try to steal it or get in the middle of it. And that's really what's changing. And Zillow's doing the same thing through their Flex program. Hey, you want a referral? You got to send it to Zillow Mortgage now in order, Zillow Home Loans, in order to get more referrals, right? And there's questions around the legality of that, but that's absolutely what they're doing. They want that consumer in that ecosystem.
Well, there's lawsuits around that right now, aren't
Correct.
there?
Yeah. I think Zillow's been hit with 4 different ones in the last just 2 weeks, a little bit, which is interesting, right? You go from the disruptor, where you're coming in and changing it, and then you become the incumbent and the target of everybody as well, too, eventually. It's the line from Batman, you die the hero or live long enough to become the villain. So
Interesting. Interesting. Okay, so we hit that one. What about the Compass Anywhere talks and acquisition?
Yeah. So I think the ones that again, we're probably a year out from that one closing. So it's really hard to kind of tell a little bit exactly how that will play out. I've read so many articles with very much certainty about it will mean this, it will mean that. They've alluded to about 225 million in synergies between the organizations after the first 3 years post-closing. Rob, like in real estate, there's really only 2 big expenses. It's people and office space, unless you're a cloud brokerage and stuff. And so, what we should expect to see is, a very big change amongst, some of that leadership and management ranks, at the ground level for the agent support. And then you should see some office closures probably. Compass bought At Properties in Chicago, earlier this year. And just buying that one company in Chicago required them to divest 5 offices in Chicago because there was too much, in particular areas, there was too much market overlap between At Properties and Compass in there. So they had to divest of some offices. So Anywhere in Compass will have to go through that same exercise of what do we have to get rid of in order to get these government and regulatory approvals in order for this to go through. And then the other thing you and I talked about too was, the play about, this is all about the exclusive listings play. And I'm sure that's part of it, right? I mean, our part of it is to kind of drum up as many listings as you can. But the vast majority of the army of Anywhere within their franchise brands are independently owned and operated, right? They're not company owned. So you can't, we run a franchise network. You can't go to your franchisees and say, you have to do it this way. Like you must enter your listings in this fashion. You've got to do this with your listings. You can't do that. You can ask, you can try to influence, you can create tools around it. But they are independently owned and operated separate brokerages, and you cannot just force them to do it. And if clear cooperation stays in place, you can't commingle those listings either into a single backstage database either as well too. As Home Services owns 2 companies in the same marketplace because they're separate brokerages. For exclusive listings under CCP, you can't commingle those together between the agents. They have to remain separate. So there's a lot of still challenges and hurdles that don't just automatically means like, they'll now have X number of listings that they can put into an exclusive listing database.
Right. But that's why Compass is fighting so hard against the clear cooperation, right? Because they want that to be shared throughout the entire company of, even franchise.
Yeah, you could then start. Companies could just kind of start forming their own side deals and stuff. And one of the things you and I talked about is that works until everybody else starts doing the same, right? It's like, as long as I'm the only country with nuclear weapons, I'm pretty strong. But as others start arming up, that level of power diminishes, right? And so everyone only plays that game for so long, right? I'm not going to give you $100 a week for you to give me $60 back in return. And so eventually everyone does that, right? And so now, regardless of where I'm at as an agent, I no longer have some type of statistical advantage of I have all the listings in the MLS plus these 20% you can't see unless you come to me. Because if everybody's doing that same thing to you, now you have 40% of what's in the MLS, and I don't have access to 40% of the things that other companies have. And if I'm a consumer sitting in that marketplace, I now go, okay, how many buyer's agents do I have to work with to find out actually what's for sale?
Right, right. Does it feel like we're getting back to the 90s? Like
Yeah,
everything
I
else
mean,
feels like it's moving forward, and this feels like, oh, go to our website or come in and look at our listing book. It just seems, at the conference I was at this weekend, there was a Compass guy up there talking, and their entire spiel was like, everybody needs to play nice in the sandbox with each other. We're all on the same team, and we're not competitors. We are, but we're not. And then I'm sitting there thinking, scratching my head, going, wait a minute, you want to keep all of your listings in house and then you want us to play nice in the sandbox and give you all the listings. So it's just a really weird time in that space.
yeah, and I certainly absolutely get behind the idea of, do we need some of these regulations in place to do the right thing, right? I think there is some overreach that happens from associations and MLSs with some of the rules, right? That we as companies, as agents, we should be able to do the right thing without maybe the force of it. And now that MLSs are just essentially data aggregators, right? Like, compensation has been pulled out of the MLS. It's just an aggregating site of where we put our listings, and they aggregate them and then feed them back out to us and to where we tell them to send it to. Do we need a 40-page rules and regulation book from the MLS? I don't get that when I partner with a vendor, for my website. We have a contract and it says what they're going to do and I'm going to do, but they don't give me 40 pages of rules of regulations I have to follow. And so I think there's some fundamental changes that have to happen with the MLS on what they really are now, which is they are a technology vendor on our behalf, and they do a great job. But they're not a governing board. They really shouldn't think of themselves as a governing board any further. I'd like to see that change as we go forward. So regardless of Clear Cooperation's in place or not in place, I hope that we all have the fortitude, again, to keep this consumer top of mind and do what's right. Now, we have companies and agents every day that take exclusive listings, and I'm fine with that. There are situations where that absolutely makes sense.
Right.
But there's also the vast majority where it probably doesn't. And that's where I really want to make sure, are we doing this for the consumer, or are we doing it for some other purpose?
Yeah. I think that's the key to this whole thing is I feel like there's agents out there that are being taught to do that. Like, go in with a 3-phase marketing program, and they're telling the consumer that it's actually going to make you more money to do that, which is just absolutely not true.
Yeah, I mean, they
Right.
have
I
a
mean,
study, but then there's all these other studies that say the opposite, right? And so, I
right.
mean, to me, I mean, you can kind of just do the smell test a little bit on when it makes sense, right? High profile seller, high profile type property, or a unique situation with the seller, that why they would want to maybe keep it, in a quieter type listing format. There are countless scenarios where that makes sense. But for the vast majority of the people, I've got a house in a nice suburb in Kansas City. Most of those, like, no, the most eyeballs is always going to make the biggest impact on selling your house.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I mean, what is that number, right? 1 to 2% of people may need that. I mean, you're talking an NFL quarterback or somebody very high profile, and they may want that to where they don't have as many showings and people just
Yeah.
coming through. But
I think
when
the
you
mistake
see,
that, yeah, I was going to say, I think the mistake they made was they thought by passing Clear Cooperation, it would almost eradicate the exclusive listings. And all that it really did was it drove it further underground, right? Because we had exclusive listings before Clear Cooperation, but I could go on Facebook and say, hey, I have this property. It's not in the MLS, but I wanted you guys all to know about it. I could share it with my friend across the street. I could do all these things. And I think when they passed Clear Cooperation, it was like, well, if you can't do any of those things, then you'll never do it. And really all it did was it just drove it underground. And now
yeah,
it's even harder to find, an exclusive listing unless you're at that brokerage than it was even before Clear Cooperation.
yeah, yeah. So, do you believe that that'll go away? I mean, do you think that Compass will win the battle about Clear Cooperation just
Yeah, I
completely
don't
going
know
away?
that it's necessarily Compass versus Clear Cooperation or Compass versus NAR. I think what ends up happening, like anything, is there's always pendulum swings, right? And typically, what happens when we are trying to correct something, we never get to here, we get to here, and then we got to bring it back in. So I think where there's an opportunity for the whole industry is to say, look, we were trying to achieve this. We got over here. Let's bring it back to center a little bit, right? And so some of those things could be is that, yes, maybe there's still a required entry into the MLS after an X number of period of time, but you can also share these in other capacities as well too, right? I mean, a little bit more of choice and freedom, which I'm great with. If there's a seller that wants to do it in a certain way, I don't like having to tell a seller that some third party technology vendor MLS is saying I can't do that on your behalf, right? And so there's an equilibrium there that we probably get back to.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Man, all good stuff, right? Ever changing.
There's no shortage of things to keep track of right now. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, do you feel like I feel a little bit like that, when I hear agents arguing about this stuff or debating about it or whatever, that they've got the agent hat on, right? And it's all about how do I make more money? And sometimes I think like, hey, do we need to put the consumer hat on? Right? I
Yeah.
mean, that's really who we're trying to benefit here. And when I hear people say, like agents say, well, Zillow has stolen our leads. Like, we give them all the information. They come back with our own leads and we have to pay for it. Right. And they're like, when somebody asks about a house, it should go back to the person that knows about the house, excuse me, the listing agent. And while I want that as a team lead, we want all of our leads back. If we really look at the consumer side of it, do they want a seller's agent, to call them and say, hey, I'm working for the seller strictly and not you. And I can't give you any information that, so sometimes I think we don't put the consumer hat on and say, Zillow, while frustrating in a lot of ways for agents, I mean, it's been pretty good for the consumer, right? They can go to one place and get, most of the information. So
yeah,
what's
they
your thoughts
took
on that?
advantage of our fragmentation, right? They saw, or maybe they even helped introduce this concept of nationality around real estate. We were very much, and again, real estate's still local, but we were very much like, why would we care if someone in Washington State can see listings in Kansas City? Who would ever do that, right? But there was this big demand, right?
Yeah.
And so they kind of brought on this idea of nationalized listings, and stuff where no matter where you're sitting, I can see a listing everywhere in the country. And I do think you see it playing out in real time right now in that Compass Zillow lawsuit, right? Because, Zillow basically said, look, you can do your marketing program, but we know your sellers will say, yeah, that sounds great, but I'm going to be in Zillow, right? And, and so when Zillow created those rules, it said, if you do it this way, you will not appear in Zillow. Compass had to file a motion within that lawsuit that acknowledged we are losing listings. We are being harmed by Zillow's process because we can't do this for the consumer. Now, to whatever that point is true or not, but they have to say in this lawsuit that they're being damaged by it. And what they've said is that, yes, from their consumers, they want to be in Zillow. So you're trying to sell this kind of limited marketing package, at least for a period of time, whether it's a week, a 2 week, or whatever. But the consumers also tell them at the same time, we really want to be in Zillow. And Zillow's rules against it have now harmed Compass according to what they filed in the court. So you see that dynamic playing out in the real world with the consumer, which is the seller, whether how many of their buyers actually come through Zillow or not, they really want to make sure their listing appears on that. And my joke has always been, for those of us that are older that remember the Steve Martin movie, The Jerk, he gets the phone book and he opens up the phone book and he finds his name and he's like, there I am. I'm somebody special. And, I wonder how much of the traffic on Zillow is sellers looking at their own listings, but it's important to them that they're there. There's a perception of value and need of being there.
Yeah. Yeah. And we all wish that, NAR would have taken a different position and just made that site, right? And then we wouldn't be
Horse
where
out
we
of the
are
barn.
today. Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you think they'll we've talked a little bit about another national type site. I mean, do you think that's happening?
Yeah, there is efforts underway and they've been under for a while, but now it really starts to be gathering steam to where there are actual technologies that are live at this point where it is, there's kind of a, code of commandments of sorts where under this public portal where all these listings are, there's no advertisements on your own listing. All listings would come back to you. All leads would come back to you. And what they're trying to figure out is the monetization behind it. And the effort is that the MLSs would pay 50 cents per listing to appear on this. Now, is it going to have $1 billion ad budget to, put a Super Bowl ad out there to kind of drive traffic? Probably not. But it is something that the agent community and the real estate community could share with consumers to start trying to drive traffic, just to gain a little bit of leverage within the portal worlds as well, too. So there are active efforts out there right now to provide what I would call alternatives to the monetized portals that are out there right now.
Okay. That doesn't sound so bad.
No, it's a matter of where the pressure is going to come from in certain markets is exerting the pressure on MLSs to feed the data and then also help cover the cost of, there's real money to run a website and an app and everything else. And And right now, the last was 50 cents per listing is what it would look like. So it's
Right.
in motion. It's being built. They're targeting a certain number of markets, to kind of go live in to kind of test it out and see how they could roll it out nationwide.
Yeah. And you and I talked a little bit about that. I don't see why that couldn't come out of the dues and not necessarily the MLS, but
Yeah, there's either way, there's plenty, right? I mean, we pay these dues. This would be a real value add, and I think a lot of us would say I'd rather them devote some of the resources towards this to maybe some of the other things that maybe we're not seeing as high level of value or return on.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so give us a little your elevator speech, or even a little longer than an elevator speech. Maybe you're riding really high, right? So going to a 177th floor, but somebody's looking at home services as a company to come sell for. So give us a little bit about what you're doing, what the company's about, and why they should be here.
Yeah, I think the beauty of home services is that we are increasingly we've historically have been a holding company, right? We were the secret ninja company that came in and bought a Reese Nichols and then snuck away in the middle of the night and you never heard from us again. But we talked about that nationalization that's happening. And so what we really want to do at home services now is provide that foundation for national breadth, global reach as a real estate company, but leaning into what's always made us special, which is local leadership, local branding. There is something really unique about the Reese Nichols, the Adinas, and the Fox and Roaches, and these great companies that are part of us, that they have this connective tissue across home services that makes them this national global network. But you've retained your local identity and culture. And in some cases, like Reese Nichols, culture that goes back 100 years. Identity within those cities and stuff where the consumer really feels a trust and value to working with that brand. And so the local leadership part of it's really what sets us apart. Most of the other contemporaries that we have would have maybe a Midwest territory divisional leader, right? And that's who you would have access to. There's not a Mike Frazier and that amazing leadership team sitting across, Kansas and Missouri providing that level of support. And we duplicate that in every single one of our markets. And then the other part of us that is really foundational to our DNA, from the day we were founded, we were a full service real estate company, meaning we wanted to provide all of the elements that a consumer would need in order to do a real estate transaction. So brokerage, mortgage, title, and insurance. And when you look at what other companies are doing, they're all trying to emulate and catch up to what we've always had. And we probably haven't been the best at tooting our own horn around that. But when you see the innovation and everything that's happening and, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, it's really about creating that seamless real estate experience. And we have a huge jumpstart on that because of the real people that we have boots on the ground in all of our offices and across our companies of home services to really support the agent and support the consumer, make sure that we're protecting that relationship between consumer and agent going forward. And that's, I think, the real beauty of home services is that balance between national, but the local cultural identity that each of our companies have.
Yeah, I love that. So give us a few numbers that are current, like, the home services big picture numbers. I can always quote what we're doing here locally and stuff, but where are we at nationally?
Yeah. So nationally, there's only two companies that if you go back to 2015 and you looked at the top 10 brokerages in real estate, there's only two companies that are still on that list 10 years later. And that's us. And then Anywhere, they were NRT at the time. I'm really proud of that fact. That means there's a lot of change that's happened between 2015 and 2025. And to be one of the only few companies that are still in that top 10 means we're still doing something right. And as we go forward to make sure that we're still on it in 2035, I think it's leaning further into those same things that I just talked about. So, we do over almost 240,000, real estate transactions every year. That's a lot of people that you all are helping out there. And it's a huge, huge number that we get behind. And obviously our parentage up through the Berkshire Hathaway companies also is something that I think provides a level of stability to that we're really proud of as well. So it's to be a top 3, top 4 or 5 brokerage in the US right now, given all the pressures, is something we're really proud of. And I like the fact too, that it'd be a lot cheaper to be a cloud-based brokerage right now, but I run the numbers. And one of the numbers that I think that really stands out is, if you look at home services, we have an employee for about every 9 agents, we have an employee. Now that, that could be any type of employee support, whatever it is. Just take the number of employees divided by the number of agents, 1 for 9. If you look at like one of the cloud-based brokerages like an EXP or Real, it's usually around 150 to 160 agents for every 1 employee, right? And so again, there's a lot of stuff that you can do online. There's a lot of cloud-based stuff, but we really believe, just like the human connection between the agent and the consumer, we believe there's a human element between the brokerage and the agent as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't get behind the cloud stuff for my business. I feel like that being around people and having a space to go and we're not here for that long in this
Yeah.
world, right? We're
Yeah.
really a speck of sand in the universe. So I want to be around people. I want to talk to people. I want to enjoy my job. And if I was sitting at my kitchen table all day, every day, and doing everything cloud based, it's just not for me. I'm not saying it's not for some people,
Correct.
but
And that's the beauty of it. I think,
yeah,
I think the biggest mistake a brokerage can make is when they try to be a brokerage for everybody. If you're trying to be something for everybody, you're something for nothing, right? And so I think it's like, clearly know what your identity is. Who are you trying to attract? Who are you trying to partner with? And that's what you'll bring in. And it's okay if there's someone that says, yeah, but this place is so much cheaper over here. Great. If that's what your highest value is, you should absolutely be there. It's okay for for some people want to be part of something different. That's all right.
yeah. I say all the time, like, we're not the fit for everybody, and that's
Correct.
okay, right?
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. So,
Nordstrom does
and
not sit around and worry about how many people are walking in the doors of Walmart. And Walmart
right,
doesn't sit around worrying about how many people are walking in the doors of Nordstrom, right? And so,
yeah.
they're just different value propositions, and it's absolutely okay to have different value propositions within this industry.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the one thing about home services that we don't talk about a lot is you mentioned the 10 years, right? Like we haven't really changed course. I mean, we've been doing the same thing really good for a really long time.
Yep.
Right. And then you see a lot of these other companies and they will say like, hey, we're a luxury company. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, but we're buying all of these companies that aren't necessarily luxury companies.
Correct.
So, and you and I had talked years ago, like, when you're not profitable, things have to change. And what do you do to become profitable? And we're seeing a lot of moves to try to become, more
You have to have a
profitable in
sustainable
that.
model, and that's the other part of us that's just been ingrained with us, and is that at the end of the day, this has to work for all sides of the relationship. It has to work for the consumer, it has to work for the agent, and it has to work for the brokerage, right? Everybody has to have a little bit of an upside in the partnership for this to work. And so, yeah, we've seen a lot of companies over the last 5 years have to like face reality and be like, yeah, you cannot just be a drunken sailor all the time. At some point, you do have to convert your model into something that can be sustainable and add something to the bottom line.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll get ready to finish it up here. So just give us anything that might be on the horizon for home services. Is there something new that you're able to talk about at all? I mean, we've talked about a lot of things you're thinking about, but even acquisition stuff or just kind of where you're headed or new tools or
Yeah, I
anything
mean,
on
I
the
think one of the
horizon.
things we're really excited about right now that's in development and stuff is we want to always make that agent consumer interaction easier, right? And so we know with the rule changes, there was that when do I introduce the written buyer agreement and stuff, and so we have some really neat applications in place right now that will help the agent create those relationships with the consumer in a much more meaningful way early on. And that's one of the pivots that we've done at home services, where in the past, we really just said, we had 130 different technology stacks deployed across home services. And what we're trying to do is work with our companies and say, if these are not differentiators, if this really isn't defining the relationships there, let's come together as an enterprise to offer the kind of that best in class platform. Because what I've learned over time is not really about which tool has the most bells and whistles. It's what's the platform? How do I make this easy as an agent where I go to one place and the most of the tools I need to do my business and interact with the consumer in one place. And that's what we'll be bringing forward as home services, this opportunity, instead of these point solution options, but as a platform, here's everything that you need to do your business.
Awesome. I love it. Well, thank you very much for being here. I can't promise you that I won't go down another rabbit hole at some point
I love it.
and text you and be like, okay, here I am again. So
All good.
eventually, if you want to block my number, I completely get it. So
I'm just glad I was safely behind this screen here. So this wasn't some live thing that you were going to dunk on me at like the end of the show or something.
oh,
Like that.
yeah.
So, yeah.
And everybody that plays basketball with me is like, okay, Chris really doesn't know Rob's basketball game if they think he's going to dunk. So we could have a 3-point shootout maybe.
There we go.
But
There we go. Sounds good.
Frazier promised me that, and then he chickened out when he was at the gym. Oh no, actually, I think I beat him when we were at the gym. Yeah, let's go with that. So,
nice. Yeah.
yeah.
Going back to his Williams School days. I love it. Yeah.
I know. Well, next time you're in KC, let's get together for lunch.
Great.
And we sure appreciate you, man. And it's nice to work for a company that has somebody like you running it. And I think anybody that listens to the podcast can see, like, okay, we're going in good directions here, and we've got good leadership. And I like that we have the local leadership, but it's really nice to know that we have the national leadership like you as well. So
it all plays an important role, and it starts with you, Rob, and all of your great agents and all the great agents across home services. So it's an honor to be in the role for sure. Thank you.
I appreciate it, man. So thanks, buddy. We'll be in touch.
Sounds great. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye. Hey, thank you all for listening today. I truly appreciate it. If you would do me a favor, if you're listening on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. And if you're listening on Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcast, please hit the subscribe or follow button on those. Also, don't forget, we are on every social media outlet you can imagine at the Rob Elderman Team. And that's on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. Like, there's places I don't even know we're at, I'm sure. So please follow us there as well. And we'll catch you next time. Thanks for listening, and hope to see you again soon.